Welcome back to a D5 football YouTube channel. This week I'm with at Mendoza from Beast Pod, who is a Barnet fan, and we're going to be speaking about Barnet's season and the sort of craziness of the season and the comparison to last season. Before we get into it, do you want to introduce who you are, what you're from, and what you do on Beast Pod?
Yes, my name's Mem. I'm a Barnet fan and season ticket holder, and I run with my friend Ian Botterill. We run Beast Pod, which is a semi-regular Barnet podcast where we just cover the current comings and goings of what goes on in our crazy little club.
So the context then for Barnet in terms of this season is last season the team got into the playoffs on a technicality, if you like, ousting Stockport. I think Stockport were quite annoyed by that because they finished seventh, but lots of games in hand. I think it was about 3 games in hand or something on some of the other teams. So the whole thing with the points per game meant that Barnet finished in 11th, I think it was, got pushed up to 7th, and Barnet eventually finished in the playoffs and competed in them to unite to Stockport, who you're obviously playing later on. So you then got to the playoffs, and for most teams, obviously that's quite good, playing in the playoffs. For Barnet fans, what was that like then, playing in the playoffs?
Well, I suppose, for Barnet fans, to be honest, actually, we were quite frustrated that the season had finished when it finished, because yes, everybody go, oh, you finished 11th, but the fact is, we were on a run of 18 games with only one defeat, and we just beaten Woking quite convincingly, and basically on the points per game that we were racking up in that run, we would have probably finished about third or fourth, and actually that would have probably given us, once we played all our games, that would have probably given us an easier tie, and also would have meant that we'd have had one less game as well in the playoffs. So actually, a lot of Barnet fans, yes, it seemed like we were, that was great, and the Stockport were hard done by. But the fact is we had loads of games in hand over Stockport, and we were just behind them. And if the season had played out, we were definitely going to be placed much higher based on our form. And so the playoffs were great. I mean, it was fun, but the problem we had was and this is the problem, is that at the start of the COVID period really impacted the club. The chairman decided that he was going to gave his notice to players before he knew about the furlough scheme. So we had players that were told they weren't going to be getting new contracts next season, and then we had some players who knew their contracts were expiring and were being told they weren't going to get renewed. We had about 3 out of our back, because we played a back 5, we played wing backs. 3 out of our back 5 decided that they weren't going to come back because they basically had clubs lined up and they didn't want to get injured in the playoffs. And because the playoffs finished after their contracts, we ended up having to go into the playoffs with basically a threadbare squad, and we ended up having like 2 youngsters on the bench. So yes, it was great getting into the playoffs, but the problem is we went into the playoffs with actually a heavily weakened team, and we also had one of our wingers as well was that we didn't want to play either because he had a move lined up. So it was a bit bittersweet. We went against Yeovil and we clung on and we did well and we got through against Yeovil, and against Notts County, the fact that we were playing such a weakened side definitely showed against Notts County, who basically just took us apart.
So once the playoffs ended and Barnet fans' new season was over, what was the sort of thinking around the Barnet fans, and what were they thinking going into what would now be called this season? But to be fair, didn't really know what was going to happen. We didn't know, was it going to start in sort of August time like it usually does? Would it be sort of September? Eventually, the season did start in October. What was the feeling throughout that summer then of Barnet fans thinking what they could do, and sort of in terms of recruitment if possible, and like I said, the players who had the contracts expired?
Everything was up in the air. And the problem we had is that for whatever reason, and this was odd, is that Darren Curry, who was our manager at the time, and Junior Lewis, his assistant, had both had contracts that finished were going to expire prior to whilst when the season was going to restart, which is really odd because most managers usually have their contracts that end at the end of the normal season, but theirs for some reason was in September, or I think it was end of August to September. And what happened was there was loads of uncertainty about whether or not Darren Curry and Junior Lewis were actually going to stay, which caused a delay in recruitment. And also what happened as well was prior to that, our chairman decided that any player that was out of contract basically just got released instantly. We had a reduced budget because we lost some of the funding that we normally get from being in the league. We lost it because it was our second season. So there was going to have to be cutting some cloth. But what happened was the chairman decided to literally just release everybody, including players that had options on their contract. So we ended up in this situation. We went into we were approaching a season with 7 players under contract, plus 2 youth players who'd come up and were on on their first professional contract. So they were nowhere near the side. They were basically, essentially going to be squad players. And then we ended up with a situation where literally 6 weeks before the season started, Darren Curry and Julian Lewis walked away because they couldn't come to an agreement with the chairman about a contract extension. And I think also issues with the budget as well, because the budget was very, very, a lot smaller than the prior seasons. So we had this season and we ended up with this really underwhelming management appointment, which was Peter Beadle, who had last been in a job, I think 2 seasons before that, where he took Hereford up through the Phoenix Club of Hereford, brought them up into I think the National League North, and then he got sacked from there. Now, anybody knows about Hereford Phoenix Club, they were a much, much bigger club than all the clubs lower down the pyramid. So it was like Wimbledon and like all the Phoenix clubs, it was inevitable they were going to come steaming up the divisions because they were having bigger crowds, bigger budgets and stuff like that, and they could get the best of what to offer. Came to Barnet, and he lives like Gloucester, Bristol way. Came to Barnet with no contacts, so we ended up with a mad situation in training with dozens of players in training, and then the squad he recruited was just wildly underwhelming. Really poor, and just basically went into the season and we were just getting absolutely battered in games. We conceded 5 on the first day. We conceded 5 3. I think we conceded 5 3 times. We conceded 4 a handful of times. 3. It was literally just couldn't stop them coming in. And so Peter Biddle lost his job about 12 games ago. Tim Flowers was brought in. He was recruited. He was actually in the running for the job in the summer. And for whatever reason, our chairman, Cleanthos, decided he didn't want that Flowers wasn't to be at that time. Then brings in Flowers. Flowers brings some of his team in. And Flowers' football is really direct. And the players just did not connect with the way he was playing. And we were appalling. Again, although we weren't losing by as heavily, there were some big thumpings in there. But we were still couldn't even look like scoring. We weren't creating. Balls just getting smashed forward. And then basically after, I think it was 1 win in 12 or 1 win in 11, Flowers got sacked last week. And then so the chairman brought in Paul Fairclough, who was a previous Barnet manager that got us promoted in, I think, 2005. And just for caretaker. And on Saturday, we drew with Bromley, and we played some football. So for the first time this season, we actually played some nice football, and we drew 2-2 with a team that's on the up. So just sort of, he looks like he's temporarily breathed a little bit of life into the team. But in all honesty, this team deserves to be relegated, and it's only through technicality that we're not going to get relegated this season. But it's a terrible team.
I guess it's sort of the decline, if you like, of Barnet, because Barnet used to be a League Two team and we're sort of in League Two, and just things have declined. And like you said, the funding, obviously, you get sort of, is it like parachute payments sort of thing, if you like, almost. It's sort of like that. And once you lose them, then that sort of.
Well, we also lost academy funding as well. So Barnet's academy has been particularly good. So I'll give an example. So Posh's Peterborough's player Jack Taylor came through Barnet's academy. So has Jamal Lowe, who plays for Swansea. He came through Barnet's academy. There's lots of players playing in Division 2 and Division 1 have come through our academy. So our academy's been really fruitful, but as soon as we lost the funding, we had to dismantle the team. And currently in our team, actually, there's about 3 or 4 what are they called? People that have graduated from our youth system. So it's actually a bit of a disaster losing that funding, because they were a good source of talent for our team, to bring in. So we're going to struggle a bit, I think, in the future years, now that we've lost the funding, that we're to produce our own players. And you're going to have to go out and sort of find players that have been released by other clubs. So it's not at the moment the situation is pretty dire, and I think a lot of it's down to the lack of direction in the club. The chairman makes decisions, constantly changing direction in his decision making. So it's really tough for there to be any kind of vision or any kind of continuity in the club. It's literally 1 minute we've got a passing manager, the next minute we've got a long ball manager, next minute we've got somebody who's, I don't know what they're trying to do, and then back to a long ball, back to passing. And it's just, as you can imagine, we keep collecting players and end up with big squads of players of just like a hodgepodge of players who different managers are brought in. So we have this, and it happens regularly. It just happens on a cycle. So it's a club that really needs to get somebody to get grabbed by the scruff of the neck and get a plan in place, and actually try and have some kind of a vision of what the club needs to be, needs to stand for. And at the moment we don't.
What do you think then the future is, in the foreseeable future, next 6 months, 18 months, 2 years and a half going forward for the team? Because while you might be sort of happy, okay, we managed to sort of survive off relegation through technicalities, that's not going to be there next season. It might be one less, relegation spot because of the Macclesfield factor, the fact that there's no relegation this year. But you're still going to be sat there thinking, well, okay, we might survive this season, but next season, it means nothing if we don't go on and change something and push forward. Is that something that you and other Barnet fans are worried about?
Well, we're very worried, because the fact is that the fan base has been gradually thinning out over the last 3-4 years, because we moved to a new stadium, which a lot of fans were really unhappy about, because it's not in Barnet, the stadium. Some of the football wasn't great, but in recent times it's been poor. But under Darren Curry, we started to see a bit more kind of the fans starting to reconnect with the club. So to lose Darren Curry was actually quite terrible, because we lost that guy that was starting to glue the supporters together. And the problem I have at the moment is, unless the chairman fundamentally changes his ways and actually starts to work to a plan and stop making these rash decisions where he's chopping and changing all the time, I can't see. I don't know how this is going to progress. So, just to give you an idea, Barnet, obviously, their stadium at the moment, we've got a brand new stadium, which is fairly brand new, and it not only is a stadium, it has AstroTurf they rent out, it has restaurant facilities, it has they even have weddings there, they have a bar there. They're even using it at the moment to give out COVID jabs. So it's basically an operation that makes money all through the year. So the problem we have is that the Barnet Football Club is only a part of this big wider business. And if a rich guy was to come to the chairman and say, I want to buy Barnet, he'd probably go, yeah, you could buy it for 2 million. But the problem is that you'd buy Barnet, say, I'm just making that figure up, but say you buy Barnet for 2 million, you just get Barnet and the badge and the team. You don't get the stadium. You don't get this wider business, which is the money-making thing that feeds into the team. You just get the team. So the actual wider business that Barnet is part of, you'd have to buy it lock, stock and barrel. So you get the stadium and you get the training ground, because the training ground is part of the same complex as well. Who's going to spend 15, 20 million on Barnet Football Club to buy us from the chairman? A club of Barnet. So seriously, what person would be mad enough to spend 20 million on Barnet? They're getting a really good business, but this is the problem. So we're a bit trapped by the fact that we are part of this big, wider business now. So the Hive operations, essentially, it's like the Hive London is a business in its own right. So you can see the supporters are starting to get at this point where we're like, how can we change this without changing the chairman? And it's almost impossible for somebody to come and take the club off him.
Yeah. That's I think a few teams have that similar problem where this is sort of the fact that there's all this with other money making sort of things going around the stadium, and that's a key part, I think, of football in the 21st century, is that you've got to make money somewhere. So that means you can build a hotel corner of the stadium or something to make some kind of money. That's part of it. But if you don't, the problem with that is if you get a rich guy who comes along, and I'm not saying this about your chairman, maybe he'll give you your thoughts on him, but just generically with any type of chairman, that's all well and good if that's going back into the team. If it's not, then it can leave you in a bit of a trap space where you've got an ex-owner perhaps who own all the land, all the stadium, and you've got a new owner who comes in who buys the badge and just the team and stuff like that. And then it's like, yeah, we're making all this money from all the facilities. You're getting pennies or whatever from player transfers, relatively player transfers. Do you know what I mean? We might get one good transfer every 2 or 3 years compared to a constant flow from any type of hotel or something that's built on the stadium. Barnet, I don't think are the only team who are in that position. So is there any way out then? Is there any sort of rich businessman who's from Barnet or from the area who,
No, because you got to remember, so you got to bear in mind, I think it was the Daily Telegraph published the top 100 rich list of the UK, and our chairman is in the top 100. Okay, there's not many people with deeper pockets than our chairman. Our chairman is the sort of guy that knows where every penny goes. So he is, if there is a cut to be made, or if there is an efficiency to be found, he will find that efficiency. But the irony of it is that actually, in real terms, and he'll always argue the toss about this, and it's true, is he does spend a large chunk of money on the running of the team. The problem we have is because, and I made the point earlier, was about the planning. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to give you an example. Swansea, they've started in Division 2 and they had a vision and they had a plan. And they said, this is our plan. And every manager that came in was just a continuation of the plan. And it meant that the players, there was continuity with the playing staff. So you had people, I've forgotten what his name is now. It's just escaped me. I can see his face. The little midfielder that came through divisions with them.
Gary Monk.
No, not Gary Monk. But he was one of the players as well. But there was another guy, a small midfielder, very good ball player. He played into the Premiership. I can't remember his name now, but somebody will probably write in the comments below who it is. But basically, so the continuity, and it's a bit like Bournemouth as well. They had the same continuity as well. So you end up with a situation where you're not constantly turning over staff. You're just basically building on top of what your squad is. So our problem has been is that we'll start the season. The chairman will cut the budget, or he'll reduce the budget and say, "This is our budget for the season." Okay, we get in a new manager. He decides that half the squad is not adequate to the way he wants to play. So he brings in loads of his players. We end up with a squad of about 10 players sitting on the touchline for half the season, trying to get rid of them. Can't get rid of them. We've got to wait another season for them their contracts expire. He brings in his players. Now, if he does badly, okay, chairman sacks him. Okay, then new manager comes in, and we got the players from the ex manager. Now the players from the last manager, new manager comes in, wants to bring in his own players. So very quickly, you end up with a scenario where you have a squad of 30, and we've had this loads of times, and you end up with a squad of 30, and you end up with a budget, okay, and having spent as much money as you probably would have is if you just given the proper budget to the manager at the beginning of the season and said, go out and get the best players you can get for that money. But what ends up happening is they get a reduced budget. They pick players based around the budget. They get sacked. New guy comes in, and then automatically the budget just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you wonder why we just spend that money at the beginning of the season and get a better squad at the beginning of the season. So that's been happening, and the cycle keeps going on. Now this season we had a vastly reduced budget, and we've probably ended up spending as much money this year on players as we did last year. And which meant ultimately we could have kept the majority of our squad from last season, and we could have been competing for the promotion places this year. But we've got a weaker squad, and we've probably spent as much money. That's the bit that makes everybody involved with Barnet just so frustrated.
Do you think then that perhaps it might be, and this might sound a bit controversial, perhaps the owner needs a bit more power, if you like, in terms of where the owner might have to say, rather, it sounds like, at least from what I'm getting from you, is that the owner is giving The chairman is giving all the power. Manager, here's your budget. You go and sign whoever. Is it a case of where you might have to sort of say, no, actually, no, we're gonna you fit my vision. If you don't fit my vision, of the players I want, then you're not going to be our manager. So then you don't have so you have the continuity, like you sort of said at Swansea. Does that sound right, or have I sort of got that wrong?
No.
There?
So the problem we have is we've got a chairman who I mean, nothing goes through Barnet without the chairman say so. Okay, nothing does. So he will approve the players, but he defers to the manager's expertise. So there'll be situations where he might turn around and go, "No, it's too expensive. This guy, I'm not spending that much money on this guy." But on most occasions, he'll defer to the manager's expertise. Now, what a lot of Barnet fans have been saying for a little while is that what we probably need is, I mean, our chairman clearly is a brilliant businessman. He clearly is a very rich man, self-made. So he's done really well for himself. But what a lot of people have said is that he doesn't have the expertise in football. He's a great administrator. So we've been saying for a while that we need some sort of director of football. So who would come in, who understands things, who would understand the value of the players, understand the value of what, and understand how this player fits in the grand scheme of things. So some of the clubs, they've had like older managers who maybe retired from management, but are now director of football. And they can turn around to the chairman and they can challenge the manager and say, are you sure that player is worth £1,000 a week? Or are you sure that player is worth 1,500? And then have a footballing conversation with him and be able to say, okay, well, how about, and have somebody to bounce off, with somebody with experience to bounce the manager can bounce off them. But at the moment we've got managers that generally they get free reign. The chairman says, yeah, okay, we can afford that, and signs it off. But we need some expertise at that kind of head of football, kind of director of football. And we have tried that, but we only ever do it for like a season, and then the chairman changes his mind again. And we had a situation 3 seasons ago, I think it was now, where we had John Still. You familiar with John Still?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John Still came in as manager, and he was pretty much given free reign on his budget because he was respected and he was a manager that had been successful. He gave a lot of average players, really good contracts, and we ended up stuck with them until their contracts expired. So a lot of them we ended up clearing out last year because they were just left over sitting on the touchline for weeks on end. And I think that scared the life out of him to give that control over to somebody else. So so I think that scared him to have a director of football. But he needs one. He needs to trust the process and trust the director of football to make the right footballing decisions. Again, it's what I'm saying about just keep flipping from one side to the other and not having not having a clear vision.
It sounds a lot like, at least to me then, sort of like Mike Ashley at Newcastle in terms of the way that the guy might be, we talk about morals, but business-wise good at running a business, but doesn't understand football, which leads to some crazy sort of why is he in charge? That perhaps if you had, they had someone who footballing wise could just run the show football wise, and the owner could do commercially whatever, that may be a bit different. It sort of sounds like some kind of parallels there between Newcastle.
Yeah, probably is. You get like some very random managerial appointments. So for every Rafa Benitez, you'll get, I don't know, a Steve Bruce or whatever. So, and we have that. We go from having some really good experienced managers, and then we've had some random sort of left field. Peter Beadle was the left field one. We had a guy, Kevin Nugent, who was the assistant at Leighton and we were for a while. He was another wild card one we didn't expect. We even got Graham Wesleyan, who everybody at Barnet hates. So, stuff like that. So it's just really random appointments we're having as well. So it's been like I said, this season has been truly awful.
So again, the team wise, you sort of gave your thoughts on what what you think the owner, the chairman should do about sort of running the club. Is there any sort of bright sparks then in a team, perhaps a younger player who's there, who's sort of doing well, who could, lead the line next season and build a team around him? Are there any bright sparks going into next season for Barnet?
Well, unfortunately, our best player is probably the most exciting player we have is a guy called Michael Petrasso. He's on loan from a team in Canada. I think it's very unlikely we'll see him next season because he's too good for our level. He's our top scorer as well, and but there's no way he's been badly used as well this year. I don't know. I don't think the managers that come in have appreciated how good a player he is. We have Scott Loach in goal, who's quality, but we won't see him next season because I think he's got injured, he dislocated his elbow at the weekend, and it's unlikely we'll see him again the rest of the season now. So he'll probably not be here next year. So we will need a new senior goalkeeper. The ones that I think are particularly good, I think I'm a big Efren Mason-Clark fan. He's had interest in the past from Championship clubs. He started the season out the blocks. He looked really up for it this season. And then he got COVID, and he's not looked the same player since he's got COVID. And I think also it coincided with the team going through a bad slump. But Efren Mason-Clark is potentially probably Championship live. He could do a Jamal Lowe, in my opinion. And then we've got JJ Hooper. We've got Josh Walker as well. Josh Walker last year was our second top scorer. He was quality, probably one of the best finishers you'll see at this level. He is a proper like Ian Wright type player. The problem was he got injured early this season, and we've not seen him for months. But he could come back in for the next few games. He's back in training now, so potentially for the rest of the season, Josh Walker could be the bright spark. So, but it all depends whether or not we can get him on the pitch. So
looks like there maybe are some players, if you can keep hold of them for next season, there could be something there. But I think is it also perhaps a race against time for fans to be back in some kind of way going into next season? Again, we don't know what's going to happen, but if there are a sort of period maybe of 4 or 5 games at the end of the season when fans are allowed in, that might give them a bit of money. And then going into next season, all right, we've got a bit of money here. Owners across the whole league can be confident we're going to have fans in for next season. They can sort of go, okay, we can put a bit more money in rather than be worried about, there not being any money or anything like that. Do you think that's sort of a race against time to sort of go back to normality, if you like, and have fans in and generate income so that there could be some kind of proper planning going into next season, the planning that we probably didn't have for this season?
Yeah, I suppose it is, but I think in some respects, actually, I think some of the people at the club probably are quite relieved that there's not been any fans at Barnet's ground, because I think the Barnet fans would have got on the case with the players, because the players have been so appalling this year. The amount of times we've collapsed in games and then just got absolutely a massive hiding. It makes me sort of feel that actually in some respects it probably would have got nasty if we'd been allowed in the stadium. So unless Paul Fairclough can turn the ship around and start to pick up some results, I'm not sure the club probably wants the supporters back in the stadium yet. So until we can rebuild the side.
So then, just sort of general overview of what's happened. Already we spoke about the managers and stuff like that. What lessons do you think Barnet should take from this season and the failures moving into next season?
Well, I think it's really important to get the right manager in to start with. Going for the sort of cheap option I think ultimately that was what it was. I think the manager who came in was desperate to get back in the game, was prepared to take a vastly reduced salary. I don't know what he was on, but that's the general feeling that, and the sort of what a lot of people have told me around the club. And then I kind of think that next season it's about getting the right budget in place early on, so we can recruit early doors. I think one of the biggest problems we had was because it got dragged out, the decision around who's going to be the manager. There was literally no time for the incoming manager to actually get out there and find some players. It was very much a case of the players are going to have to come to us, and we're basically picking up bargain bin, players that have been binned off by everybody else. And been rejected by dozens of clubs already, and we were like the last chance saloon for them. So I think definitely we need to get everything organised, get a manager in place before the season starts, get everything, all our players lined up, get all the ducks in a row, and basically have something before the pre-season friendlies come in, have the squad pretty much in place. That's what we need, I think.
Yep. And last question before we go. As we're recording this, Barnet are playing Stockport tonight. How many goals do you think Paddy Mann is going to score against Barnet?
In all fairness, though, we looked a much, much better side at the weekend. A much better side. So if Paul Fairclough has had another week, he's had another few days with the players, I'm not. I have been joking with my mate who lives in Stockport that probably get a spanking, but I don't think we're going to get. I think we'll lose, but by the odd goal tonight. I can't see us getting another spanking. I think the players were playing with a smile on their face at the weekend, which for the first time in months, and I think there is some talent in that team. It's just that it's just a case of just trying to extract it from them and just get the confidence back. But it could be tonight. Tonight at Stockport, they could cause a little surprise.
I think that was more a case of how good he is rather than how bad Barnet are. Because I think Paddy Madden is that should be illegal, really. You know what I mean? It should be illegal. And we did a chat with Fleetwood fan who said he reckons that in the games left that Stockport have got, he could easily get 15 goals. I'm not quite sure 15 goals, but I think he might score quite a few towards the end of the season. Just, sort of new player bounce, if you like, that we do sometimes get the National League. That the way the transfer window works, that it's not like you have to sign a player in the summer or January. You can get some of these players who come in on loan with just a few games left and get that new bounce. People wanted to find out where you are, what you do. Where should they find? We're going to leave a link in the description, of course, but where would they find you?
Well, they can follow me at Memdozer, MEMDOZER, or can find me at BeesPod. So, we do, it's about probably every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, we do a podcast on Barnet. So just follow us for any, if you want to have conversations about, Barnet or non-league football or music or anything like that, just come and follow me.
There you go, and obviously BeesPod. We'll leave all those links in the description so you can go and have a listen. And thanks to all the viewers for watching this and just sort of hearing general vibe, if you like, and general story of Barnet and where the position the club are in. And I keep getting told I have to keep saying you have to subscribe or something. So subscribe below. It's free apparently, so you can go and do that. But yeah, thanks for you, mate, for taking your time out and to tell us about Barnet.